Malik stepped into the bright, minimalist gallery with a quiet confidence, though his heart raced in his chest. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, curating a selection of his best pieces, each a bold experiment in abstraction, color, and texture. His work was unconventional, pushing boundaries in ways that many in the art world might not understand. But Malik knew that was the point. True art, to him, was about challenging perception, even if it meant rejection. He had heard the stories of artists who struggled to be seen until the world eventually caught up with them. Today, he was meeting Mr. Dalton, the owner of one of the most exclusive galleries in the city. He had heard of Dalton's reputation, a man known for curating work from established, world-renowned artists. A man whose taste was considered impeccable by the industry elite. Getting an appointment with him was no easy feat. The fact that he had managed to secure one meant he was on the verge of something big, Malik thought. He stood in the sleek reception area, surrounded by white walls and glass displays that gleamed under the gallery's spotlights. The space had an air of cold professionalism, a stark contrast to the warmth Malik had always felt in his studio, where he could lose himself in the paint and texture of his creations. Here, though, it felt like the art was meant to be admired from a distance, as though it belonged to an untouchable world. "Mr. Malik?" A woman's voice snapped him from his thoughts. She was dressed in a sharp black blazer, her eyes scanning him with a certain coolness. "Mr. Dalton will see you now." "Thank you," Malik said, standing tall, though his palms were slick with sweat. She led him through a set of glass doors into an expansive private office, where Mr. Dalton sat behind a large, polished desk. The walls were adorned with some of the most expensive pieces of contemporary art in the world, each one a carefully curated masterpiece. Malik couldn't help but admire the collection, even as he felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. Dalton rose from his chair, a tall man with sharp features and an air of condescension that seemed to hang around him like a cloak. He extended his hand with a stiff smile. "Malik, I presume? It's a pleasure to meet you." Malik shook his hand firmly, his nerves hidden behind a calm exterior. "The pleasure's mine, Mr. Dalton. Please, have a seat." Dalton gestured toward the chairs in front of the desk. As Malik sat down, Dalton took his seat again, folding his hands in front of him. "So, you're the artist behind the buzz I've been hearing about." Malik nodded, slightly surprised that Dalton had heard about him at all. "I've been working on a new series that I believe challenges conventional ideas of beauty and representation. I'd love for you to take a look at some of my pieces." Dalton's eyes flickered with interest, though it was quickly replaced with an almost dismissive glance. "Of course," he said, his voice too smooth to be anything other than rehearsed. "I'm always open to seeing new work. But I must admit, I've seen many young artists come and go with grand ideas, most of which fade into obscurity." Malik's stomach tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "I understand. But I'm confident my work speaks for itself." Dalton raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Well, let's see if your art is as confident as you are, then." The gallery owner motioned toward an assistant, who wheeled in a large portfolio of artwork. The assistant opened it carefully, revealing a series of colorful canvases, each filled with bold strokes of neon paint, geometric shapes, and layers of texture that seemed to pulsate with life. The pieces were a fusion of modern and abstract styles, capturing a raw energy that Malik had poured into each one. He leaned forward as Dalton examined the first piece. The silence stretched on for a few seconds, though it felt like an eternity to Malik. He waited for the first sign of approval, any indication that Dalton recognized the brilliance in what he had created. Dalton finally spoke, his voice dripping with sarcasm. How avant-garde." He didn't seem impressed. He flipped to the next painting without so much as a glance back at the first one. "This one seems, well, chaotic. Are you sure you want to show this to the world?" Malik's face flushed with embarrassment, but he kept his cool. "I think it's exactly what the art world needs, a disruption." Dalton chuckled softly, the sound cold and dismissive. "A disruption, yes. But not one that's marketable. Art is about more than just throwing paint on a canvas and hoping it sticks. It's about form, technique, and intention. These pieces? They lack cohesion. They lack meaning. He stopped at the next piece, an explosion of color that Malik had poured his heart into. This one looks like something a child would do with a box of crayons. Malik's heart skipped a beat. The sting of Dalton's words hit harder than he expected. I assure you, Mr. Dalton, the meaning is there, he said, his voice steady despite the growing frustration bubbling beneath the surface. You just need to look deeper. Dalton didn't seem to care. He flipped through the portfolio with a casual indifference, barely pausing to glance at each piece. He made a few more dismissive comments about the work, too abstract, too wild, too disorganized. Malik tried to explain the vision behind his pieces, how they spoke about identity, race, and the complexities of modern society, but Dalton wasn't listening. He was too busy making judgments, as if he had already decided that Malik's art wasn't worth his time. Finally, after what felt like hours of being belittled, Dalton closed the portfolio with a finality that made Malik's chest tighten. I don't think this is the right fit for my gallery, he said, his tone indifferent. But don't worry, you'll find someone who appreciates whatever it is you're doing. Malik stood up, his hands trembling with a mixture of anger and disappointment. He had expected rejection, perhaps even a critique, but not this. Not the mockery, the dismissal of his hard work, his vision. I understand, Malik said through gritted teeth. Thank you for your time. Dalton didn't even bother to stand. He simply waved his hand dismissively as if the meeting had been nothing more than an inconvenience to him. Good luck with your art. I'm sure you'll figure it out eventually. As Malik walked out of the gallery, the weight of Dalton's words echoed in his mind. But beneath the hurt, there was a spark of defiance. He had come to prove something, and although Dalton had rejected him, Malik wasn't going to let that define him. The art world was vast, and if Dalton couldn't see the value in his work, someone else would. Malik had a vision that was too powerful to be ignored forever. After the humiliation of his meeting with Mr. Dalton, Malik found himself in a quiet, reflective place. For the first time in a long time, he questioned his place in the art world. The rejection stung, but it also ignited a fire within him that was harder to ignore than ever before. His work wasn't meant for everyone. It wasn't meant to be easy, to fit into the neat, commercial boxes that so many galleries and critics wanted it to. His art was a challenge, and he realized that wasn't a flaw, it was its strength. That night, back in his small studio apartment, Malik stood in front of his latest creation. It was a chaotic swirl of color and shape, a piece that encapsulated his frustrations and triumphs, his identity as both an artist and a black man living in a world that often refused to see him. He looked at the painting, his mind racing, and he made a decision. I'll show them, he muttered to himself, his hands trembling with renewed determination. I'll make them see. He spent the following weeks immersing himself in his work, pouring everything he had into creating a new series of pieces, more daring, more unapologetic, each one an exploration of the complexities of race, identity, and the human experience. But this time, he didn't seek validation from any gallery or critic. He decided to take his art directly to the people, bypassing the gatekeepers entirely. He began posting his works online, not just on social media, but through specialized art platforms and forums. Malik knew that the internet was a vast, often unpredictable world, but it was also one that didn't follow the same rules as the traditional art scene. Anyone, anywhere, could stumble upon his work and feel moved by it. He took the risk and made his pieces available for sale, setting reasonable prices for those who were eager to support new artists. To his surprise, people responded almost immediately. Comments began flooding in, praise for his unique vision, excitement over his bold use of color and texture, admiration for his willingness to tackle difficult topics. Word of mouth spread like wildfire, and soon enough, Malik's art was being shared widely across various social media platforms. One particular comment stood out among the rest. It came from a well-known art critic, Evelyn Morgan, a figure whose reviews were followed by galleries, collectors, and artists alike. She had a reputation for being tough but fair, and her words carried weight in the art community. Malik had seen her name before, and the thought of her attention both terrified and thrilled him. I am absolutely captivated by the work of artist Malik. His approach to color and abstraction is revolutionary, and his exploration of identity through visual expression challenges the viewer to reconsider everything they think they know about contemporary art. This is the work of a genius. It demands recognition. Malik's heart skipped a beat as he read the words. His mind raced. Was this real? Was he really being recognized by one of the most respected critics in the industry? Evelyn's review went viral almost overnight. It was shared by art lovers, collectors, and curators from around the world. For the first time in his life, Malik was being seen. It didn't stop there. As the online buzz grew, Malik received messages from collectors eager to purchase his work. The idea that people were willing to pay for his art was surreal, but it wasn't just any collectors, it was top-tier collectors. They weren't buying his pieces because they were fashionable or easy to understand. They were buying them because they recognized the brilliance in his work. It was a breakthrough. His art was no longer just a personal expression, it was now a movement. Within a matter of weeks, Malik was receiving offers from galleries he had never dreamed of being associated with. His inbox was flooded with proposals from major art institutions who wanted to showcase his pieces. But Malik was no longer interested in proving anything to people like Mr. Dalton. He had found his own path, and he would continue on it, regardless of whether or not the establishment embraced him. Still, the reality of his newfound fame felt overwhelming. Malik knew the art world was fickle, and it wasn't just about talent, it was about perception, connections, and the right timing. He had seen too many artists get swept up in fleeting trends, only to be forgotten when the next big thing came along. But Malik didn't plan on becoming a passing fad. His work wasn't just about what was popular, it was about what was real. What was true. As the weeks passed, he spent more time refining his craft and creating new works that pushed even further into new territories. He explored deeper layers of abstraction, introducing unexpected materials and techniques that made his pieces stand out even more. His art was evolving, just as he was. With every new piece, he felt more confident in his direction. And then, the call came. It was from a high-end auction house, one of the most prestigious in the world. They had seen his work and were eager to feature one of his pieces in their next auction. The invitation was a dream come true for any artist, but for Malik, it was a sign that his work had transcended the underground art scene and was now a part of the elite world he had once been shut out from. When he received the details, he was stunned. The auction house planned to feature a large-scale painting of his, a piece he had created only weeks earlier. The auction was set to take place in just a few days, and Malik had the chance to watch his work be sold to the highest bidder. He prepared for the auction with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the day of the event approached, he found himself anxiously pacing the floor of his small studio. He had always believed in the power of his art, but this was different. This was the moment that would either solidify his place in the art world or prove that he was just another fleeting flash in the pan. When the day of the auction arrived, Malik sat in the back of the crowded auction hall, surrounded by art collectors, investors, and curators all vying for the next big thing. As the bidding began, Malik's heart raced. He watched, almost in disbelief, as the numbers soared higher and higher. The piece was generating excitement. The bids were flying in from all directions. Finally, the gavel came down, and the painting was sold for an unprecedented amount. The final bid exceeded even the auction house's expectations, setting a new record for emerging artists. Malik could hardly believe what had just happened. His art, his vision, had sold for millions of dollars. The room erupted in applause, but Malik remained still. This wasn't just a victory for him, it was a statement. His work, which had once been dismissed, was now seen as invaluable. And the world would never be the same. As the buyers and critics praised his work, Malik's thoughts drifted back to that meeting with Mr. Dalton. The man who had mocked him, who had dismissed his art as a joke. He couldn't help but smile to himself. In the end, it was clear that the world had recognized his genius. And there was no going back now. Malik leaned back against the soft leather of his chair, still in disbelief. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all of them too fast and jumbled to make sense of. He had just witnessed his artwork sell for an astronomical sum, more than he had ever imagined possible. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from collectors, art critics, and even a few prominent artists, congratulating him on the sale. For a moment, it felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's success unfold before his eyes. The auction house had hosted the event in one of the grandest venues in the city, a towering glass building that screamed opulence and exclusivity. Inside, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The room had been filled with the kind of people Malik had only seen in glossy art magazines or on social media: wealthy buyers, gallery owners, high-profile curators, and critics who held the power to make or break an artist's career. They had all come for one reason: to witness the emergence of a new star in the art world. And Malik, standing there among them, was the star they had all come to see. As the auctioneer's gavel fell and the final bid was announced, Malik couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was the moment he had worked so hard for. His journey wasn't over, but it had taken a significant leap forward. The success of this auction was the affirmation he had longed for. His art had found its audience, and the world was beginning to see the depth of his talent. But Malik wasn't interested in basking in glory. He had always known that one piece wasn't enough to sustain his place in the art world. He needed more. He needed to prove that this was just the beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings and interviews. Art critics who had once ignored him were now clamoring for his attention, eager to learn more about the artist who had just shattered auction records. Collectors were eager to purchase his next pieces, and Malik felt an unfamiliar pressure mounting on his shoulders. He had gone from a struggling, unknown artist to someone whose work was now highly sought after. It was a dream, but it came with expectations that Malik wasn't entirely sure how to handle. In one of his interviews, a well-known journalist asked, "How does it feel to be the artist everyone is talking about? Do you feel like your success is a result of the right timing or sheer genius?" Malik smiled, the question hitting a little too close to home. He had never been one to take credit for things he hadn't earned. "It's not just about timing," he said thoughtfully. "It's about having something real to say. I've always believed that art is about pushing boundaries, about expressing something that others might not see. I'm not interested in creating what people expect. I'm interested in creating what people need to see, even if it challenges them." His words resonated, and the journalist quickly penned an article that was published the next day. It went viral, adding even more fuel to the growing fire of his success. As his work gained more recognition, Malik continued to make waves in the art world, securing more high-profile sales and even catching the attention of a few influential gallery owners. He was on the verge of becoming a household name. But there was one thing that Malik had yet to address: the rejection he had faced from Mr. Dalton. The man who had mocked him, dismissed him, and refused to see the genius in his work. As Malik continued to rise in prominence, the thought of Dalton's dismissive comments kept coming back to him. Part of him wanted to prove Dalton wrong, not just in his success, but in the way he had been treated. And so, he began to hatch a plan. In the midst of his success, Malik found himself contemplating something bigger. The art world, he had realized, was broken. It was an industry that celebrated exclusivity, that pushed out voices like his and relegated them to the margins. It was a world where collectors and gallery owners dictated the terms of success, and artists like him were expected to fit into preconceived molds. Malik knew he had been lucky, he had broken through, yes, but many others weren't so fortunate. He began to reach out to other emerging artists, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, and offered them the chance to showcase their work. It wasn't about charity. It was about changing the system from within. He was determined to create a new kind of platform, one where artists didn't have to beg for approval from elitist gallery owners or critics to be seen. A platform that celebrated authenticity over marketability. Malik's influence was growing, and so was his wealth. He knew that with his newfound success, he had the power to change things. But first, he had to deal with Mr. Dalton. It didn't take long for the news of Malik's success to reach Dalton's ears. The gallery owner had been monitoring the rise of Malik's career with growing unease. At first, he dismissed it as another passing trend, but as the sales records continued to climb, he began to realize that Malik was no longer an emerging artist, he was a force to be reckoned with. One afternoon, as he sat at his desk, reviewing a list of potential new clients, Dalton's assistant came in with a stack of papers. "Mr. Dalton, I think you'll want to see this," she said, holding up a recent article about Malik. Dalton glanced at it and sighed. "Another article about that kid," he muttered. "Why does anyone care about him? His art is too chaotic. It's not refined. It doesn't belong in the gallery scene." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, I think you might want to reconsider that view. The auction house reports show his latest sale exceeded expectations. His work is not just popular, it's commanding millions. His name is everywhere. He's making waves in ways we haven't seen in years." Dalton frowned. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had dismissed Malik, thinking he would fade away like so many other flash-in-the-pan artists before him. But the more he read, the more he realized that Malik wasn't just a passing trend, he was changing the game. "Perhaps we've made a mistake," Dalton muttered, more to himself than to his assistant. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He hadn't been interested in Malik before, but now? Now, with all of this success, there was a sense of urgency in his thoughts. Dalton reached for the phone, his fingers brushing against the cold surface of the receiver. He had to fix this. He needed to reach out to Malik, before it was too late. But Malik had already moved on. He wasn't interested in begging for a seat at the table. He had built his own table. And now, the art world would have to reckon with him on his own terms. The auction had proven that. The next chapter was about to begin. And this time, Malik would be the one calling the shots. Malik's success in the art world had transformed him, but not just in terms of wealth or fame. He had become a symbol of defiance, not only against the gallery elite but also against the very system that dictated what art could be. As his name gained recognition, Malik began to take his newfound influence seriously, realizing he had the power to redefine the boundaries of the art world. But that would require more than just selling his pieces for record-breaking sums. It meant creating something bigger. Something that could empower other artists like him who had been ignored, dismissed, or marginalized. It was in the midst of the growing frenzy surrounding his art that Malik made a decision. He would create a new platform for emerging artists, one that celebrated diversity, individuality, and raw expression. A space where artists wouldn't have to compromise their vision for commercial success and where they could find real support, not just exposure, but resources, mentorship, and a community that valued their authenticity over their marketability. He called it the Vanguard Collective. Malik poured his heart into the creation of the platform, enlisting the help of other artists who had faced similar struggles to get their voices heard. He reached out to people in various creative fields, graphic designers, sculptors, digital artists, and even poets, to join the collective and contribute their work. His goal was simple: to provide a digital and physical space for underrepresented voices in the art world to shine. A place where their art could be seen and sold without being filtered through the lens of commercialism. The collective quickly took off. Artists began submitting their work to the Vanguard Collective, and Malik's online platform became a hub for new talent. The site featured interactive galleries, live-streamed events, and virtual art exhibitions, all designed to showcase a wide range of voices from all walks of life. Malik wasn't interested in curating a safe or refined selection of art, he wanted to push boundaries. The works displayed on the site were loud, experimental, and sometimes messy, just like the people who created them. In addition to the online platform, Malik organized pop-up galleries in various cities, from New York to Los Angeles to London. These temporary exhibitions allowed artists to interact directly with potential buyers, collectors, and critics, giving them a chance to showcase their work without the need for gallery representation. The pop-up shows quickly became the talk of the art world. They were raw, authentic, and full of life, a stark contrast to the sterile, polished environments of traditional galleries. The success of the Vanguard Collective didn't just lie in its growing popularity, it lay in its power to shift the narrative. Artists who had once struggled to get noticed were now finding their voices amplified in ways they had never imagined. One particular artist, Nina, a black woman who had painted vibrant murals reflecting her community's history, had always been told her work was too bold for commercial spaces. But after being featured on the Vanguard Collective, she found her pieces selling out at every pop-up exhibition. Her work, once marginalized, was now celebrated for its courage and honesty. Malik had always believed that art wasn't about fitting in, it was about being heard. And now, the Vanguard Collective was giving artists a chance to do just that. As the platform grew, Malik's influence began to spread even further. His success had given him credibility, but it was the collective's impact that made him an icon in the eyes of many. He wasn't just the artist who had sold for millions, he was the artist who had changed the game, the one who had shown that authenticity and vision mattered more than marketability. But as his reach expanded, so did the scrutiny. Critics, many of whom had once dismissed him, were now paying attention. Some tried to undermine the collective, calling it a revolt against the established order, while others accused Malik of taking advantage of artists' struggles for his own personal gain. But Malik wasn't concerned with these criticisms. He had never been a part of the establishment, and he didn't plan to become one now. His mission was bigger than pleasing critics, it was about changing the system, and that wouldn't happen overnight. Then came a message from an unexpected source. It was an email from Mr. Dalton. Malik had not heard from Dalton since their fateful meeting, and part of him had hoped that he would never have to deal with the man again. But the email was there, staring at him, as if the universe was urging him to take action. The message was brief but to the point. Malik, I've been following your progress. Your art and the Vanguard Collective are making waves, and I have to admit, I didn't see it coming. I was wrong about you. I'd like to offer you a spot in my gallery. We can discuss the details if you're interested. For a moment, Malik just stared at the screen. It took everything in him not to laugh. This was the same man who had dismissed his art as chaotic and too wild, the same man who had told him his work wasn't fit for the gallery world. And now, suddenly, he was offering him a spot. Malik felt a rush of vindication. This wasn't just about business, it was about proving a point. He had built something bigger than Dalton's narrow vision of what art should be, something that was changing the rules of the game. The fact that Dalton was now reaching out was a testament to Malik's success, and more importantly, to the fact that the world had finally recognized the value of his work. But as he sat there, composing his response, Malik realized something important: he didn't need Dalton's approval. He had created the Vanguard Collective to empower artists who were just like him, who didn't need the approval of the established art world to succeed. He typed his response with precision. Thank you for your offer, Mr. Dalton. However, I've found my own path. The Vanguard Collective is my platform now, and I'm not interested in joining your gallery. I built something that stands on its own. But I appreciate your acknowledgement. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Malik leaned back in his chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. Dalton had never understood his vision, and he never would. But that didn't matter anymore. Malik was no longer fighting to prove himself. He was leading a movement. The world was changing, and Malik was at the forefront of it. The Vanguard Collective was only getting started, and it was about to reshape the art world in ways no one had ever imagined. Malik's refusal to collaborate with Mr. Dalton became a defining moment in his career. It wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a bold statement to the art world, a declaration that he no longer needed validation from the old guard. As his influence continued to grow, the Vanguard Collective became more than just a platform for emerging artists, it became a movement. A rebellion against the status quo, a challenge to the elitist systems that had long controlled the art world. Despite the success of his platform, there were still those who were skeptical of Malik's approach. The art world had a long history of exclusivity, and the idea of an open platform where anyone could submit their work was considered revolutionary, some would even say radical. Critics who once dismissed Malik were now forced to confront the fact that his vision was reshaping the very foundation of the art scene. But with that influence came enemies. As the Vanguard Collective grew, so did its detractors. A coalition of established galleries, critics, and art investors began to mobilize against Malik and his platform. They feared that the Vanguard Collective was undermining their carefully curated, profitable systems. Art had always been about exclusivity, about being part of the inner circle, and the idea of democratizing the art world threatened to upend everything they had worked to maintain. Whispers of a counter-movement began circulating, a new initiative that aimed to restore order to the art world, an effort to preserve what they called the integrity of the industry. The campaign was led by a group of influential gallery owners, critics, and collectors, many of whom had been challenged by Malik's rise. They argued that art, to have real value, needed to be curated and controlled, not open to anyone with a website and an online presence. But Malik was undeterred. He had always known that change didn't come without opposition. And as the collective's reach expanded, so did its visibility. People who had never considered art as a meaningful part of their lives were now looking at it differently. The Vanguard Collective had brought art back to the people, and they were responding in droves. Art lovers, collectors, and enthusiasts were flocking to the platform to discover new voices, to support marginalized artists, and to challenge the traditional definition of what art could be. One afternoon, Malik received a call from Nina, the artist whose murals had been featured in the Vanguard Collective. She had become one of the platform's biggest success stories, and her work had been selling at unprecedented rates. But her success had come at a price. Her art was being showcased in mainstream galleries now, and she was starting to feel the pressure of balancing her authenticity with the expectations of her new buyers. "I'm being pushed to change," Nina said, her voice tinged with frustration. "They want me to paint what's commercial. They don't want my stories of community and resistance anymore. They want something they can sell, something that fits their idea of art. I'm afraid I'm going to lose myself in it." Malik listened closely, his thoughts echoing her concerns. Nina wasn't the only one struggling with the balance between personal expression and market demands. He had seen it happen to countless artists, how their work was watered down, reshaped, and repackaged for commercial consumption. The Vanguard Collective was supposed to be the antidote to that, but it wasn't enough for Malik to just provide a space for artists. He needed to make sure that they didn't lose their voice once they gained success. He needed to create a true community of artists who supported each other's visions, without being beholden to the whims of buyers or critics. "I'll help you, Nina," Malik said firmly. "You don't have to compromise. We built the Vanguard Collective for artists like you, people who want to stay true to themselves. We'll find a way to make sure your art stays yours." Over the next few weeks, Malik worked with Nina and several other artists who were facing similar pressures. He provided them with resources, both financial and logistical, to keep their work independent from the commercial pressures that sought to change it. He partnered with organizations that could offer support for artists, ensuring they had the means to live off their art without sacrificing their integrity. But even as he helped others, Malik's own journey was evolving. He had become a global figure, recognized not just for his art but for his leadership in a broader cultural movement. The Vanguard Collective had grown far beyond its initial scope. It wasn't just an art platform, it was a voice for social change. Malik had begun to speak out publicly about the role of art in activism, about how creativity could be used to challenge systemic injustice. His own art had always reflected his lived experiences, and now he was pushing others to do the same. But as his platform grew in power, so did the spotlight on him. The art world's elites had never taken kindly to outsiders rocking the boat. They saw Malik as a disruptor, someone who threatened their power and profits. Behind the scenes, they began to conspire. The counter-movement they had started was growing, and it wasn't just about maintaining control over the art market, it was about dismantling what Malik had built. One evening, Malik was in his office, reviewing the latest data on the Vanguard Collective's performance, when his assistant burst in with urgent news. "There's been a leak," she said, breathless. "Someone's trying to destroy the reputation of the Vanguard Collective, and they're using some pretty underhanded tactics." Malik's pulse quickened. He had expected pushback from the establishment, but the leak was more than just an attempt to tarnish his image. It was a coordinated attack designed to undermine the platform's credibility and drive away its supporters. News outlets began running stories claiming that the collective was nothing more than a get-rich-quick scheme for artists who wanted to exploit the art world's power imbalance. Accusations of fraud, exploitation, and lack of artistic merit quickly spread across social media, despite there being no solid evidence to support the claims. Malik knew this was only the beginning. The people behind the smear campaign were powerful, and they would stop at nothing to see him fail. But he also knew one thing for certain: they had underestimated him. He had faced rejection before, from galleries, critics, and even his own community. But each time, he had found a way to rise above it. And now, with the Vanguard Collective as his weapon, he was ready to fight back. The smear campaign wouldn't break him, it would only strengthen his resolve. Malik's next move was calculated. Instead of responding to the rumors directly, he took to social media with a message of defiance, standing firm in the face of the attack. He shared a heartfelt post, outlining his vision for the Vanguard Collective and the impact it had already had on so many lives. He called out the art world's gatekeepers, demanding that they recognize the value of authenticity, diversity, and community. The post went viral, rallying artists, collectors, and fans alike to his side. The backlash against the smear campaign was swift and overwhelming. Artists who had been part of the Vanguard Collective spoke out in defense of the platform, sharing their stories of how it had changed their careers and their lives. Malik had turned the tide. The more they tried to tear him down, the more his platform and movement grew stronger. And with every new ally he gained, he knew that the Vanguard Collective was no longer just a reaction to the old system, it was a new vision for the future of art. The fight for the soul of the art world had reached its boiling point. Malik knew that the smear campaign, despite being damaging, was only a small part of the larger battle ahead. The counter-movement against the Vanguard Collective was gaining traction, and its leaders, the very gallery owners, investors, and critics who had been threatened by Malik's success, were ready to bring everything to bear. They had underestimated him before, but now, they were planning their most powerful move yet, a public attempt to discredit the collective once and for all. Malik, however, wasn't worried about their tactics. He had weathered their attacks before. What concerned him was the growing division within the very community he had fought so hard to build. Not all the artists in the Vanguard Collective were equipped to handle the pressure, and some were beginning to buckle under the weight of public scrutiny. With the world watching, the collective's members faced criticism, both from their supporters and detractors, and the pressure to conform was immense. Nina, whose work had once sparked the loudest applause, was struggling the most. After an especially grueling interview with a major art magazine, she called Malik late one evening, her voice cracking with emotion. "They're telling me to change," she said, her words heavy with defeat. "They want me to create art that's more palatable. They say I can still speak my truth, but it has to be toned down, made more accessible. I don't know if I can keep fighting this fight." Malik's heart sank as he listened to her. He had seen this happen to countless other artists, how their authenticity was slowly chipped away in the pursuit of mainstream acceptance. The establishment had a way of seducing people, making them believe that they could have it all if only they played by the rules. "You don't have to change, Nina," Malik said firmly, his voice steady. "You created the Vanguard Collective because you believed in staying true to yourself. Don't let them make you second-guess that. We don't bend for them, we create our own space. You can still be unapologetic." Nina paused before responding, her voice softer but resolute. You're right. I fought too hard to let them win now. Thanks, Malik. I won't let them change me. Malik felt a surge of pride for his friend, but the battle was far from over. The art world's elite had been watching his every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. He knew that the time was fast approaching when he would have to face them directly. The next day, the Vanguard Collective made an announcement that would shake the art world to its core. Malik had been quietly negotiating with a group of investors and philanthropists who supported the collective's mission. They had agreed to back the Vanguard Collective on a much larger scale, providing the platform with the funding it needed to open a permanent space, an art gallery, exhibition hall, and cultural center dedicated to the ethos of authenticity, accessibility, and empowerment. It would be the first of its kind, a gallery not for the elite but for the people, a place where anyone could showcase their work without fear of censorship or compromise. The announcement was met with both excitement and outrage. Supporters hailed the move as a bold step forward for the future of art, while critics called it a reckless attempt to defy tradition. The Vanguard Collective was no longer just a virtual platform, it was about to take physical form in the heart of the art world. As the opening date drew closer, the media coverage intensified. Every major news outlet was either praising or condemning Malik's vision. Some hailed him as a revolutionary, others painted him as a threat to the very foundation of the art world. It seemed that every conversation about art, from galleries to museums, from online platforms to high-end auctions, now centered around Malik's movement. He had become the face of a new wave in art, one that rejected conformity and embraced the radical power of self-expression. But even as his star continued to rise, the old guard was making its final move. A press conference was called, featuring several of the most influential gallery owners, curators, and critics. It was clear they had banded together to confront Malik head-on. The conference began with the usual pleasantries, but it didn't take long before the knives came out. I'm sure we can all agree that art is an important part of our culture, one gallery owner began, his voice smooth and calculated. But we also have to recognize that art, at its core, is a business. The Vanguard Collective's radical approach, its rejection of the carefully curated gallery system, puts the entire industry at risk. If anyone can create art and sell it without proper vetting, the value of true artistry is diminished. Another critic joined in. The idea that anyone with a website and a few followers can call themselves an artist is irresponsible. We've seen it before, self-proclaimed artists flooding the market with meaningless works, trying to capitalize on a trend. It's dangerous and unsustainable. Malik sat in the back of the room, his jaw clenched, as each word cut deeper than the last. This wasn't just about art, it was about power. The gallery owners and critics were defending the structure that had kept them in control for decades. They were trying to silence a voice that had disrupted their carefully managed system. Malik had expected this, but hearing it in such a public forum still stung. He stood up, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. The room went silent, every eye on him. Let's get one thing straight, Malik said, his voice calm but unwavering. I'm not here to sell art. I'm here to give artists the freedom to create. The Vanguard Collective isn't about market value, it's about truth. It's about giving space to voices that have been silenced for too long. It's about empowering people to tell their stories, even if they don't fit into the narrow, whitewashed standards you've spent decades cultivating. He paused, letting his words settle. Art doesn't need your approval. It needs to be free. The room erupted in a flurry of responses. Some gasped, others muttered in disbelief, but Malik remained steady, his gaze unflinching. You can try to tear us down, but you'll never silence us. Because we're not just creating art, we're creating a movement. And movements can't be controlled. The Vanguard Collective is here to stay. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the room exploded into a mix of applause and boos. Some cheered, while others jeered, but it didn't matter. Malik had made his point. He wasn't backing down. The battle had come to its final confrontation. The art world had been forced to reckon with a new reality, one that was no longer defined by the elites. Malik had won the right to tell his own story. And with that, the Vanguard Collective would continue to change the face of art, not just for him, but for all those who had been told their voices didn't matter. The press conference marked the climax of the struggle. Malik's speech had resonated far beyond the walls of that room, reverberating through the corridors of the art world and out into the streets. It was clear that the battle for the future of art was no longer a matter of just one man against the establishment, it was a movement. A collective of artists, curators, activists, and supporters who had rallied behind Malik and the Vanguard Collective were now part of something much bigger. They were part of a new era. In the days following the confrontation, Malik's message continued to spread. News outlets ran his words, art bloggers and influencers shared his speech, and collectors, both seasoned and new, expressed interest in the upcoming Vanguard Gallery, which was set to open its doors in a few short weeks. The gallery, located in a reclaimed warehouse in the heart of the art district, was already becoming a symbol of defiance, a testament to the power of independent voices in the art world. But Malik knew that the real work was just beginning. The gallery's opening would be a grand statement, a public-facing demonstration of everything the Vanguard Collective stood for. It wasn't just about showcasing art, it was about creating a space that rejected the old paradigms. It would be a place for raw, untamed expression. A sanctuary where artists could showcase their work without worrying about whether it would be deemed marketable or commercial. And, above all, it would be a space where diversity, culture, and history could shine without the interference of elitism. A week before the grand opening, Malik sat in the gallery, now complete, watching as the final touches were added. The walls were adorned with striking pieces from some of the Vanguard Collective's most talented artists, the floors filled with sculptures and installations that told stories of resistance, resilience, and self-discovery. The space was alive with energy, a reflection of the collective spirit. This wasn't just a gallery, it was a revolution in the making. Nina, along with a dozen other artists from the collective, had agreed to help set up for the opening. She stepped back from a massive mural she'd been working on, admiring the way the bright colors swirled across the wall, capturing a raw energy that had once been buried under societal expectations. "This place, it feels different," she said, her eyes glowing with pride. "It's like it's breathing." Malik nodded, feeling the same sense of accomplishment and possibility. For years, he had fought to create this kind of space, a space where artists could thrive without being constrained by the narrow limits of the art world's gatekeepers. And now, he was standing in the very heart of it. "I told you we'd get here," Malik said with a smile. "This is just the beginning." As the days leading up to the opening passed, the buzz surrounding the Vanguard Gallery grew louder. Invitations were sent out, press coverage flooded in, and influencers from every corner of the art world wanted to be part of this groundbreaking event. It wasn't just an opening, it was a cultural reset. It was the moment the art world would be forced to reckon with the future. The opening night arrived, and with it, a wave of anticipation. The gallery doors swung open, and the space was immediately filled with a crowd of diverse faces, artists, collectors, critics, and art lovers from all over the world. The energy was electric as people roamed the rooms, taking in the provocative art and engaging in conversations about what art truly meant in a world that was constantly changing. Malik stood at the entrance, welcoming guests with a sense of pride he had never known before. He exchanged a few words with old friends from the gallery world, many of whom had shown him nothing but disdain in the past. Now, they were here, some in awe, others unsure of how to respond. But that didn't matter. Malik had won. His vision had become reality, and the power dynamic in the art world was shifting. Then, in the midst of the crowd, Malik saw a familiar face. It was Mr. Dalton. The wealthy gallery owner, once so dismissive of Malik's work, now stood at the threshold of the Vanguard Gallery, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Malik approached him, wondering if this was the moment where their paths would cross again, this time with a very different power dynamic. Dalton didn't greet Malik at first. Instead, he looked around at the pieces hanging on the walls, his eyes narrowing as he took it all in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned to face Malik. "You did it," Dalton said quietly, his tone more subdued than Malik had ever heard it before. "I never thought you would make it this far. But I see it now. You've changed the game." Malik paused, taking in the sincerity, or perhaps the begrudging respect, in Dalton's voice. The man had built his empire on controlling the narrative of art, and yet here he was, acknowledging that Malik had upended everything he stood for. It was a rare moment of acknowledgement from a man who had once tried to tear him down. "I didn't just change the game," Malik replied. "I'm creating a new one." Dalton gave a small nod, then glanced around again at the gallery. "I don't agree with everything you've done. But I can't deny it anymore. What you've built here is something real." Malik smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. "That's all I ever wanted. For art to be real." As the night wore on, more conversations unfolded, some tense, others warm and celebratory, but through it all, Malik knew that the art world had been forever changed. No longer would the gatekeepers hold power over artists. No longer would authenticity be stifled by the demands of commercialism. The Vanguard Collective was more than just a platform. It was a movement that had ignited a cultural revolution, and it was only just beginning. As the final guests filtered out, Malik stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by the art he had fought so hard to bring to life. He had built something far greater than himself. And as the lights dimmed on the opening night, he knew that the journey was far from over. The revolution was only just beginning, and the world was about to see just how far it could go.